These last 2 nights of meditation have taken us into a high ground of meditation. And tonight should take us one step further, because it should lead us from the meditation on up into the result of the meditation. You see, meditation in and of itself is nothing. Meditation in and of itself would serve no purpose, except that in meditating we have a specific end in mind. And meditation is not that end. Meditation is only the avenue toward which we reach that end. What we are seeking is, first of all, a conscious realization of God. Then we're seeking one step higher than that. Because even in that realization of the presence of God, there is apt to be 2 of us, God and me. We don't want God and me. We want God alone. Since God is infinite, there is no me except a part of God's infinity. And that makes it all God. And that is the highest step in the spiritual demonstration. It is that part where Jesus says, "Knowest thou not, thou seest me, thou seest the Father that sent me, for I and the Father are one." He was crucified because he made himself equal with God and thought it not unseemly to do the works of God. Now that must in no wise be inferred to mean that Jesus was making himself God, but rather that Jesus was understanding that God was all there is to his being. I suppose we could go to our little ivory figure of last night and say there was really nothing to that but the sculptor, the carver. It was the carver's skill, the carver that imparted its beauty and form and symmetry. It was all the carver, and all that the figure was the showing forth of the artistic integrity and ability of the carver, of the artist, of the sculptor. Now, so you must see, and for our example in meditation, you just take me up here on this platform. And as you close your eyes about 3/4 of the way, just leave a little slit to look out of, and you're thinking of me up here, what is it really that you can think about me? Well, of course, one thing that you observe is life. And then the question you ask yourself, yes, but is that a life separate from God, or is that the life God? Is that the God life flowing? Is that the God being? And you certainly know then, because inwardly divine intuition tells you that there can only be one life, whether it flows through me or flows through that plant that we have here. The one life, the eternal life. And so in your meditation, the first thing you would know about me is life, and that is not a life separate and apart from God, not a life that was born on a certain day, but that really was the God life imparting itself, expressing itself as this individual life. And then you would remember how many, many sessions of classwork we have had here of one nature or another. And you would say, why, that's divine intelligence. That couldn't be anything stored up in a brain. That couldn't be anything that a man learned out of books. That is really the divine intelligence, the divine word imparting itself. Well, that isn't man, that's really God expressing itself through this individual, as this individual. But actually, it must be clear to you that whatever of wisdom you have heard, whatever of intelligence you have noted, can't be personal. It must be of God. It must be God expressing its own infinite quality of mind, of intelligence, of life. And then again, you think of all our days and evenings here together, and you realize the nature of our relationship with each other, and you know that nothing has entered into it except love. And you say, yes, it's been a delightful love. It's been a warm love. It's even been a personal love. But that, too, isn't of man, because it isn't given unto man to be so widespread in love. No, this is a love of God because it isn't based on personal acquaintanceship. It isn't based on personal qualities. It isn't based on any personal knowledge that we have of each other. The love that is flowing in this room from me to you, from you to me, that's the love of God. We don't even know each other personally to know what our personal qualities would be if we knew each other outside. And so this feeling that's engendered between us is love. But you can see that it's love of God. It's the love of God for His children, the love of God's children for each other, and for the Father. And right here, too, you'll notice something. That if we here in this room hadn't first found a love of God, we would never have found a love of each other. Because the love that we have for each other is the love which we found in God, the love which we found of God. It is really our love of God and God's love of us that we're sharing with each other. So there's no such thing as a personal love here. And so as you observe, you say, why, God is love. God is the only love there is. God is the love flowing from one to the other. And then for a moment you sum up and you say, why, all I'm observing up there is God life being expressed, God love being expressed, God wisdom, God intelligence. All in and of God, and therefore all eternal, all immortal, all for everlasting, all impersonal and impartial and universal. As you continue to observe, the question must come to you, is there anything that I can observe there that I would say isn't in and of God? even the body, if there hadn't been a life force, if there hadn't been a life principle in operation, even a seed couldn't have developed into what we call a body, a mind, a soul. And so even the body must be the product of a principle at work. The only principle there is an infinite spiritual principle. Even the body, then, must be immortal and eternal. Probably at this point we might look and see some defects, something that doesn't conform to our standard of intelligence or love or beauty or form. Well, I say, what about it? And the question is answered in this. If a principle brought this forth, if this man and body, the manifestation, the expression, the showing forth or evidencing of the activity of a principle, then the product of that principle must be as perfect, substantial, immortal, eternal, pure, as the principle that brought it forth. And therefore, it may be that if I'm seeing a defect, if I'm aware of a defect, perhaps it is in my perception of that which is there rather than in it itself. That's an important point to remember. You must be aware, in order to gauge any object, person or thing, you must be aware, first of all, of that which produced it in order to understand it. Remember that we proved beyond any doubt last night that the understanding, even in a measure, of that which produced a thing increased our understanding of the thing itself. And so, in even the tiniest degree, if you can see behind me and around me and understand that all that is visible, all that you can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell of me is really only the showing forth, the evidence of the creative principle, the divine soul, the activity of life, in other words, the infinite invisible. And it is this infinite invisible, or eternal and immortal being, substance, soul, which has sent itself forth into manifestation and expression as my individual being. And therefore all that it is, I am. All that God is, I am. All that the Father hath is mine. Now just to turn from me for a moment, this is the form of treatment that we are to understand and to use when caring for our friends, family, patients, students. This is our form of meditation, communion, and treatment. In other words, if we are alone and we have nothing now to do with any form of treatment for anybody, it's our own communion with God, we would meditate in the same way to begin with. We would think of ourselves And then we would turn and try to realize the creative principle of our being, try to understand that which brought us forth into expression, try to catch some glimpse inwardly of the nature of God, of the activity of God, of the soul and substance of God, because only in the degree that we can understand the nature of God can we ever understand the nature of our own being, since I and the Father are one. Since I am not something separate and apart from God, but God has incarnated itself as my very being. God has formed or expressed itself as my very being, and my very mind is the God mind, my very soul and substance and life, and even the substance of my body. The Word has become flesh. The Word God has become individual, as you and as me. And so, even separate and apart from the practice of truth or the healing work of truth for others, there must be this same form of meditation or communion. It always must begin with God. It must always have God as its subject and as its object, since subject and object are one, not two. And so, as we learn to commune that way about our own selves, we begin to think of our affairs, not as my affairs or your affairs, but as the affairs of God. And then we understand what it means that the government shall be on his shoulder. Whether it is to find a position, whether it is to find a home or a companion, that's not our problem. We must learn to take no thought for anything that concerns our affairs. We must let the Father within us, that which is manifesting itself as our individual being, we must let it concern itself for us. We must remove from our experience that personal sense of I that says, what will I do? How will I get along? How am I going to get across the street? How am I going to make myself understood? Oh, that word I. We are about our Father's business in letting that word I dissolve out. And let the I which I really am, the infinite invisible, let it take over. Let it be responsible that we awaken in the morning, and that we awaken in health and harmony and wholeness and abundance and joy and peace and power and dominion. Through the understanding of the nature of God as the creative principle of the universe and the maintaining and the sustaining principle of the universe, we come into the realization of ourselves as children of God, those in whom the Spirit of the Father dwelleth. And the Spirit of the Father, the Spirit of truth, is the Comforter. It is that which goes before us to make the crooked places straight, and so the responsibility is no longer on our shoulders for our lives, but on God, whose life it really is. As we follow that out in our experience, you see how the moment we have a relative at home, or a friend, or a patient, or a student, how automatically we now fall into that same form of meditation. As you have beheld me up here, you must learn to behold every member of your family, of your circle of friends, of your patients, of your students, and finally of your enemies. you must learn to take this same form of meditation. Oh, it's easier, I know, when you're looking up and seeing a teacher on the platform to be knowing those truths about the teacher, but remember, a truth, if it is truth, is universal. And so it can't only be true about a teacher, it must be true about the spiritual identity of every individual. And remember this spiritual truth that you have observed about me on this platform is not the truth about my humanhood or mortality any more than it is the truth about your humanhood or your mortality, because all that is human or mortal or material of us is illusion. And so you have declared the truth not about what you have seen on the platform with your eyes, but what you have beheld on the platform with your inner eye. Do you follow that distinction? Now remember this. The metaphysical world is harming itself. It is not producing the healing works that it should because of this one point. It looks out at you, and it looks out at the cat and the dog and the tree, and it says you are spiritual and you are immortal and you are the child of God. And then it tries to make a human being conform to that pattern shown thee on the mount, and it can't be done. It is only through your spiritual intuition. That's why I say, when you look up here, don't see a figure sitting in a platform, and don't see his name, and don't see his reputation, because he may fool you tomorrow. Don't do that. No matter who it is, look through it to the causative, creative principle of it, and then realize that that which it is in reality is of the pattern shown thee in the mount. And disregard the appearances that you see, hear, taste, touch, and smell, even if they're good. Don't even believe your eyes when your eyes see good. Why? Why, the healthiest human being in the world may be a dead one tomorrow. The richest human being in the world may be a poor one tomorrow. You can't make a mortal material concept of being spiritual. You can't immortalize a human concept. You can't spiritualize matter or materiality. The only thing that you can do is to look through the appearance to the reality. Now, if you need any reminder of it, think of our little ivory figure, and then see that when someone said the expression on the face, they were talking about a piece of ivory. Now, what expression was on the face of a piece of ivory? Only, not the expression of ivory, but an expression imparted there by the idealization of the man who carved it. And someone commented on that, on the beauty of the fingers. And they are beautiful. But remember, that isn't ivory that's beautiful. That was the divine concept in the mind of the artist. That's where the beauty was. It was merely shown forth as the ivory figure. And so the immortality was really the divine idea in the mind of the Creator. And your immortality and my immortality is the activity of God. The activity of the divine idea in the mind of the Creator is the immortality of your being and of mine. That isn't too deep. That isn't too deep. You can understand right now that the beauty of any object that's formed is only the impartation of the beauty in the mind of that which formed it. Isn't that clear? Could an artist create any greater beauty than the beauty he can conceive of? Could a musician bring forth any more harmony than the amount of music that they can conceive of? No. The outer expression can never exceed nor be less than the idea of its creator. And therefore this universe can never exceed and can never be less than the infinite perfection and immortality of its creator. This universe exists as a divine idea in the mind of the universal creative principle, and it shows forth all the qualities, all of the activities of its principle. Isn't that clear? Oh, if you once catch this idea that all it is, well, all it is explained in the first chapter of Genesis. In the beginning, God, and God formed. Well, if God formed it, is it less perfect than that which formed it? No. And it tells us that anything that God didn't form wasn't formed. Anything that God didn't make wasn't made. But all that God made is good. Don't you see then that everything is good, and that what we behold, unlike good, was never made, any more than the tracks were made to come together or the sky was made to sit on the mountain? That represents our misperception of that which is. Like looking at a diamond and calling it a rhinestone. You don't change the nature of a diamond by believing that it's a rhinestone. It still is diamond. And so it is, you don't change the nature of man, woman, or child by seeing them as sick, sinning, aging, or dying. They are still all that God made them in the first chapter of Genesis. The very showing forth, the evidencing or witnessing of the activities, qualities of God. And so, healing work represents not doing something to somebody out here. Healing work represents changing our concept of that which we behold. And therefore, healing is never done to you. You don't have to change your thinking. You don't have to look for errors in your consciousness. You are perfect, sinless, pure. Otherwise, the first chapter of Genesis is all wrong, and the first chapter of John is all wrong. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Oh no, it isn't you. It is the belief about you that must be corrected. And who must correct it? Anyone who is entertaining a false concept of you. That may be you. And it's always your practitioner. When you bring yourself to your practitioner and say, I am sick, if your practitioner believes it and tries to make you well, they are entertaining a false concept of you, and they need a very good practitioner to help them. Oh no, Father, forgive me if I ever believe that under this whole canopy of heaven there is a sick or sinning or material or dying man, woman, or child, or one that has ever died, or one that ever will die. Oh no. Oh no, I said to you, close your eyes about 3/4 and just look out through that slit and try not to see what the eye would like to see, but what the inner eye knows is true. In the beginning, God. And in the end, what does Revelation say? The temple not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. So whether it's Genesis or whether it's Revelation, the end has to be as the beginning, the unfoldment and revelation of man's true being. What is revelation except the revelation? What is to be revealed? except the true nature of man. That's all there is to be revealed, the true nature of man and of the universe. And what is the true nature? Go back to the creative principle and find out. Once you satisfy your mind as to the nature and character of God, you'll know what man is, because man and God is one. Inseparable, indivisible, immortal, eternal, and perfect. Only don't make the mistake of believing when the doctor says the lump is gone or the fever is down, now we've proven spiritual man. You haven't done a thing. You've just proven another healthy man for a little while. Don't judge by appearances. Don't think for a minute that you can rejoice in human health or human wealth or human perfection. There lies all error. There lies all error. Whether you are looking at what you would call a good human, a well human, a moral human, wealthy human, don't rejoice in it. Don't take satisfaction in it, because that picture may change. Learn to do as we have been doing here for 2 nights. Look behind the appearance, even when the appearance is good, and behold the creative principle of that appearance, and then you will have a permanently spiritual being before you. And when you look at these sunsets, when you look at your gardens this summer, when you look at these beautiful mountains, don't stop there. Don't stop there. That's what the world is doing. Look around it and look behind it and catch a glimpse of that which brought it forth into expression, and then you'll always have permanent forms of beauty around you and permanent forms of harmony, wholeness, completeness, life, truth, and love. But if you try to see perfection in the forms, you will lose it. You will lose it. Try to see wealth in $1 million and you lose it. Try to see health in a perfect body and you lose it. But look beyond the form to that which produced the form, then you'll always have the perfect form, because you'll always have that perfect divine essence forming itself ever anew. Material sense sees the form and enjoys it. Spiritual sense always beholds that which is the underlying substance and reality of the form, and thereby always has the form in perfect order. The materialist who looks at the form may see it crumble and break before his vision. You remember some of our wealthy friends in 1929 who jumped out of windows? Why? Because they were looking at the forms called money, and because they seemed to be absent for a day, they thought the world had come to an end, and for them it had. But there were many men who were in that same position in those same months, who looked beyond those forms and saw, why, the same intelligence that made that will make it all over again. The same integrity, the same fidelity, the same effort will produce it again, and it did. And that's what we're doing in this work. If instead of looking at forms, you learn to look around and through and behind the forms to the divine essence, always appearing, the invisible becoming visible, then you will say with the Master, if you destroy this temple, in 3 days I will raise it up again. When he tells you that in order to find your life you must lose it, he is telling you what we have been saying for 2 nights, that in order to find your eternal life and immortal body, you must lose sight of the physical form and begin to behold the substance and intelligence and life of which it is formed. For a moment, take your mind off of your body, off of your pocketbook, off of anything in the visible manifestation in the visible world, and get your thought back in the invisible. And then, when you've lost that sense of the physical or outer self as the allness and caught the glimpse of spiritual being as the real life of you and the real law unto you, then you will have found your eternal life right here and now. And then you'll find your body showing forth less of the world's discord and more of spiritual harmony. Now, I said that tonight we would come to a point where we would go beyond the meditation to the object of the meditation. Let us say that every word that I have spoken this evening was my meditation. In other words, my eyes were closed and I was thinking this to myself instead of saying it aloud. That is the way I was meditating. I was thinking on God and God's creation. I was pondering the idea of God as the universal life force. I was pondering the idea of God as the intelligence and the law of the universe. And I was realizing that since God was infinite being and the only creative principle, that it was forever forming this universe, including man, in its own image and likeness. That is, imbuing it with itself, with its own ideas, with its own completeness, with its own perfection, with its own immortality, and so forth. That which was appearing we call man or the universe. It was really God appearing as individual form and an infinite variety. And that was the way I was meditating. First of all, I was doing it for myself and for my own world. Or, if I had a relative or family to concern myself with, I was meditating for them, realizing this truth about them. Or if I had someone looking to me for help, this is the way I was meditating for them, or treating. You see, I never once came down to the level of a sin or a disease or a lack or an unemployment. I kept this meditation or treatment completely in the realm of God and God's ideas and God's formation and God's activity and the elements and substances and qualities of God appearing as man. Now, having done that, I have still another step to go. Since my declaring this, even silently or orally, doesn't make it so. It represents an observation or inner awareness of that which is so. And to some extent, you may say, it represents the activity of my thinking, of my observation, of my awareness. And that is not yet deep enough to be a healing communion or meditation. there is yet a step further. And that step is when, having meditated or communed in this wise or treated, I now become silent, knowing that no human thought is a healing agency. The activity of the human mind is not a healing agency. Now I must become aware. I must receive from the depths of my own being an awareness, an impartation, some sign that I and the Father are one. Call it a connecting link. And so, for the second part of my meditation, I take this listening attitude, this "Speak, Lord, thy servant heareth." And here I know that there is a depth of me, a depth of consciousness of me, which is far above my thinking mind, which is far greater than my reasoning mind, and that it can tell me things never heard by human ears, never seen by mortal eyes. And I take this attitude of expectancy, of alertness, and you can see that in that I couldn't fall asleep, possibly. An attitude of alertness, of expectancy. And don't forget, the one I'm waiting for is God. Wouldn't be a very high and noble idea to fall asleep at that particular point. Now do it with me. Get back there deep into your own being. God is no respecter of persons. He can talk to any one of you as well as to me, or anyone else who ever heard him. Because God is closer to you than breathing and nearer than hands and feet. Now, when this second part of the meditation, communion, or treatment fulfills itself, and you either feel some little click within you, or hear the still small voice, or become aware in any way of a divine impartation, then is when you may expect the object or reason for your meditation to appear. In other words, harmony. The meditation was to bring you to the point of contact with God, but the point of contact with God was to destroy the illusions of sense and to show forth the divine harmonies right where the sin, disease, death, lack, or limitation had claimed or appeared to be. And that, you see, is really the idea of our meditation. Not just the meditation in and of itself and for itself, but the meditation for the purpose of achieving the realization of our contact with God, of our oneness with God, and then beholding the result of it, the dissolution of the appearance of limitation, discord, and the revelation of spiritual being, spiritual activity, spiritual harmony, where the error or discord had claimed existence. Remember that right where the sky and the mountain seem to meet, they do not. Remember that right where the water seems to be covering the road in the desert, No such thing is taking place. And only through your awareness, your knowledge, do you come to know that what seemed like water on the desert was mirage. And so it is through your spiritual wisdom, through that degree of spiritual intuition which is aroused through this meditation, through that you become aware that what you have beheld as disease was not disease at all, but mirage. What you beheld as a discord or inharmony or injustice wasn't that at all. It was a mirage. And therefore you'll see why in this work, the object of our work is never to heal somebody out there. It is to raise ourselves to that place of divine apprehension where we see God appearing as individual man and woman in all of God's glory. Not all of man and woman's glory, in all of God's glory. Showing forth God's handiwork, showing forth the perfection of God, God's perfection. And so, meditation, communion, treatment doesn't do anything to people out here. It doesn't change them or correct them or heal them or reform them. They don't need it. This is God's universe and it's perfect. But it lifts us above the mortal and material sense of existence to where we can behold spiritually, rightly, God's creation. Always remember that your premise is that God's creation is already perfect. There is no fallen man. There is a fallen concept of man which we entertain about man, but there's no fallen man. Oh no. That's in the same nature as gossip about a good person. You may have some very evil gossip about a very good person, but that doesn't change that person or make them so. And you don't have to give any treatment to change that person. What you have to do is to come into the awareness of that which they already are. And so it is, all this belief about mortal man, sinning, dying man, that's gossip, that's rumor, that's material sense. And this meditation or treatment or communion does nothing to man, does nothing to this world. This is God's perfect world. There's nothing wrong with it at all. It's spiritual. It's immortal. It's eternal. It's good. What is wrong is the material sense of God, man, and the universe that we entertain. And so, our meditation, our treatment, our communion is not aimed at curing people out there or reforming them or making them better tempered. Oh no. God forbid that we should tamper with God's universe. But the object of it is lifting ourselves into a state of spiritual illumination where we can look out and say, why, this is God's world. It is perfect. It always has been perfect. I have been seeing it incorrectly. I have been beholding it through finite sense. It's like looking at the world through blue glasses and seeing a blue world. Oh, just change them to rose-colored glasses and it'll be a rose-colored world, but they'll both be wrong. And that's why I say, don't look out and see bad human beings or sick human beings and then turn around and see good human beings or healthy human beings. That's both wrong. Look right down through the center and see God. God manifesting itself in all its glory as individual you and me, and develop that spiritual perception. We never will see a material sense of world rightly through material senses. Don't ever believe that by training the human mind to remember these statements that will change your world for you. It won't. It lies in the development of spiritual senses. It is, I'm just thinking now of that book. I'm sure many of you remember it, especially those of you who have a Christian Science background anywhere, will remember that book, Carmen Aretha, by Stocking, and the little girl in it, who right from childhood went out swimming among the sharks and all the things out in the ocean, and walked into the woods among all the snakes and everything else. And when the people were amazed at it, she just looked at them innocently. Well, what's wrong? God made them. And she was never harmed. Now, she wasn't looking out through material sense. She had a God-given inner spiritual sense that made her see that what were alligators or snakes to other people were little expressions of God, manifestations of God, children of God to her. It was through her inner spiritual sense that she perceived that. Now, so it is in this healing work. Nobody becomes a healer because they learn certain statements of truth. That is why I'm sure that many of you have already found that owning a certificate on the wall attesting to the fact that you completed a course as a practitioner hasn't made you one. That we're meeting all up and down the country, the amount of people who have certificates entitling them to the title of practitioner because they finished the course. Finishing 20,000 courses won't make anyone a practitioner. No amount of knowledge of this truth will make anyone a practitioner. Nobody can give degrees making one a practitioner. No. Any more than a marriage certificate makes a couple married. That doesn't make them married. That's just the same thing as your certificate of practitioner on the wall. It's just a license, a legal license. Doesn't indicate anything more than you fulfilled the law, that's all. It doesn't constitute marriage, and that certificate doesn't constitute being a practitioner. What constitutes being a practitioner? The development or cultivation, unless one has it naturally, of that spiritual sense that does not agree that there are sick and sinning mortal men and women, that looks right out at all appearances of sickness and sin and discord, and through this inner sense has seen God as the parent, and said, well, as the parent, so must the child be. And that spiritual intuition constitutes the practitioner. I have often been asked about initiation into the spiritual brotherhoods. And may I tell you this about it, that no one in the outer realm, not on this plane, and not on the other plane, or the higher planes, or highest planes, can take you into a spiritual order. Nor can they keep you out, because it has nothing to do with anyone but yourself. Now, I don't know how to explain that to you except this. Supposing you went to a university to study law, and you completed the entire course, and you had your 80, 85, 90% grades. But the university wouldn't give you your degree. Wouldn't you be a lawyer? Even if you couldn't go into court and practice because you didn't have a legal certificate, wouldn't you be just as much a lawyer as if they had given you a certificate? On the other hand, supposing you only had 50% grades, but because you were a good football player, they gave you a certificate. Would that make you a lawyer? No. Nobody can make you a lawyer. Nobody can prevent your becoming a lawyer. When you have a certain degree of legal knowledge, You are a lawyer. Well, it's the same way. Nobody can make you a practitioner. It's an utter impossibility. Now, we have quite a few people in the Message of the Infinite Way who are practicing and doing healing work, but not one single one of them has a certificate, including myself. Why? We haven't any authority to give any. We have no legal entity, we have no corporate existence, and we have no authority to bestow degrees or licenses to practice or teach. And so people say to me, can I practice the Infinite Way, or can I teach the Infinite Way? And I say, sure. If you're a practitioner or teacher, go ahead. I can't authorize you, but I can't stop you. I have no authority over you. It's a degree of your consciousness. And when you attain that degree, you're out doing it. Oh, there are loads of people that I haven't yet heard about that are practicing. Every week or so I get a letter from somebody who's been practicing it or having groups teaching it for months, and I haven't known anything about it. I can't make anyone a practitioner or teacher, I'll tell you that. They do it themselves. You do it yourself. And how do you know when it's there? When people come and ask you for help, you're a practitioner. If you're going out looking for them, you're not a practitioner yet. And the same with being a teacher. How do you know when you're an Infinite Way teacher or any other teacher? When somebody comes and asks you to teach them. If you have to go out looking for them, you're no teacher. You merely have a degree or a license. There's the difference in this work. We are dealing with spiritual consciousness, with spiritual attainment. Now, anybody in this world is a practitioner once they have learned to meditate and perceive the nature of the invisible appearing as the visible. That makes them a practitioner, and that makes them a teacher too. And what's more, as you continue on and on and on in this living and moving and having your being more in the realm of the invisible than the visible, one of these fine days you find yourself being initiated into one of the orders, into one of the spiritual orders. There are several spiritual orders, but they all have their interrelationship because the requirements in all of them are the same. The attainment of a certain degree of spiritual consciousness. That's why sometimes it's kind of laughable when you hear some of the Hindu religious orders claiming Jesus Christ as one of their students because they have documents with the name Jesus on it. Well, of course, he may well have been a student in India. I would have no knowledge of that. But I can assure you that any document with the name Jesus on it had nothing to do with Jesus of Nazareth, since he never knew himself by that name. There never was a Jesus of Nazareth in Nazareth. If there were, and there was, a man, his name was Yeshua. And how could he sign it Jesus? Any more than we would sign our name in a language foreign to us. Oh no, let's not prove our spiritual development by anything human, by our degrees or where we studied. It has nothing to do with it. Those who have never studied anywhere with anyone have the same opportunity to be masters. Why? What constitutes mastership? Somebody elevating somebody in a spiritual order? It never happened in the history of the world. Everyone elevates themselves by the degree of their unfoldment, and at each degree of unfoldment they receive the new title and the new robe or the new jewel, but nobody gives it to them. They acquire it as you would acquire the title of lawyer by a certain degree of wisdom and law. not by a certain document on the wall attesting to your being a lawyer. That would only be a legal recognition of it. But before there could be a legal recognition of it, there would have to be an attainment of it within your consciousness. Would anybody give you a degree of musician or lawyer or doctor if you hadn't attained that degree within you before they gave you the outer degree? That's clear, isn't it? That's clear. Anyone who has ever received a teacher certificate in a normal school knows that they couldn't have gotten the certificate unless they had attained the degree of teacher in their inner consciousness, which the certificate is only an outer recognition of. Is that clear? Well, so it is with us. Whether someone asks us for help or not depends on whether or not we have attained the degree of practitioner, not the certificate of practitioner, because that may never come. That may never come. All of us in our work are out doing this healing and teaching work without any certificate. Not one of us has a certificate or a license or an authority to do it. It's being done on the consciousness itself. That reminds me. Thank you, friends. And we will continue this unfoldment on spiritual living as we go further in this class. Aloha, aloha, and blessings.